This is a recording of a meeting, the study committee of the registry, to be held St. Joseph's Infirmary, 2 o'clock, October the 29th. Mrs. White, Miss Garland, our president, had asked me to act as chairman of this committee, and the committee consists of Sister Christine and Mrs. Garland and myself. And Miss Atkins is in here as an acting secretary. So I feel it's only fair in discussing it with the members to let each one of you have a few minutes if there's anything that you'd care to say privately, and before we meet as a whole. So the floor is yours.
May I ask you, Mrs. Mays, just what you want to know?
Well, anything that's trouble. We just know there's a whole lot of trouble, and if you can give us any pointers that will help us, we would be glad.
I'd be happy to. I was sent to the registry the latter part of June, officially, I believe, in July the 1st. And I was told effective immediately that I was to carry out the rules and the procedures of the registry. We have a little green book with these rules in there. This I tried to do to the best of my ability. According to the rules, the private duty nurses are expected to have a yearly physical. They're also supposed to belong to the 5th District GFNA as well as the registry, Nurses Official Registry, 449 Henry Grady Hotel. I found a number who had not had their physicals, approximately 98. This was reported to the registry committee. I also found a number who did not belong to the 5th District. Neither had they paid their dues to the Nurses of the Professional Registry. These people were notified by letter. They were also taken off the active list. This list has been given to the chairman of the 5th District Registry Committee. As a matter of fact, our president, Ms. Gladys Garland, was there when it was presented. It's also in the minutes. I have a partial list here. I inquired I asked the registrars why this hadn't been taken care of previously, why these girls were allowed to work when they did not belong to the 5th District, and neither had they paid their register dues. They were not only working actively on the registry in the middle of the year, this was in July, but some of them were even doubling. I asked one of the registrars, one particular girl, why she hadn't been asked to pay her register dues. The registrar's excuse was, Mrs. White, she's just had a baby. Nevertheless, she was acting, she was working, she was a private duty nurse, she was receiving calls from the registry. A couple of the nurses had not only had not paid their 1963 dues, they had not paid their 1962 dues. These are on record. If you care for me to, I can give you their names.
We would like them in writing.
I have it in writing.
Right.
The registry committee also has it in writing. When I asked on August the 4th, I had to relieve the night clerk on Saturday night, and the registrar who relieved me on Sunday morning at 7 a.m., I opened our little card index, and I asked her, I said, who is responsible for seeing that these people belong to the 5th District, and who is responsible for seeing that they have paid their dues? And she replied, the auditors and the lawyers are responsible. Well, it so happened that night that I had been able to read some of the legal reports that were in a brochure either from the auditor or from the lawyer. And apparently, it was dated 2 years ago, I believe. And I don't know whether it was from the auditing department or Mr. Jackson, who was a lawyer at that time, but he said specifically that at no time had they assumed the responsibility of seeing that these nurses were properly licensed in the state of Georgia, and at no time had they inspected to see about their dues, that they did not consider their responsibility. I pulled this file out and opened it up and showed it to the registrar in question. And I'm not so sure of her reply. However, I am positive those legal documents are missing from the office as of right this moment. And I have asked everyone to help me look for them. I understand there is a copy in the GSNA headquarters. If not, I also understand that if the documents came from Mr. James E. Jackson's office, that according to the law, he has to keep them for 7 years. I mean, his firm has to keep them for 7 years, although he has expired. I still haven't found the documents, and they were missing from that day forward. In taking these people off the active list, according to the rules, they didn't belong there in the first place. I made myself very unpopular. This was brought out in the minutes of the first meeting. Mrs. Garland was present. At that time, I stated I hadn't entered in a popularity contest and thought I could take it because I had some repercussions. A nurse was sent on duty over one of the local hospitals. She had not paid her 5th District dues. She was not on the registry. She was pulled out of the active files. This was done on a weekend when I was not there. The registrar who followed her, who had been there approximately, I believe, 13 years, did not bother to call that nurse and see that she was taken off duty, did not bother to leave me a note or anything about it. When I discovered it on Monday morning, I called the hospital and they said they would immediately take her off of the case, that she was not eligible. This nurse immediately paid her dues to GSNA and also the registered dues. She also had a physical examination made. I would like to add that the girls were so very anxious to have their physical examinations made, performed or what have you, that one of them even sent her husband down on his lunch hour to bring her physical form in. Human nature being what it is, when these things are brought out, in other words, you have been here a number of years, why does this exist? Why do I pay my dues? Why do I go to the trouble to belong to GSNA, to the ANA, and the other organizations when other people are not allowed to? And naturally, if someone is, well, let's say if they haven't done exactly what they're supposed to do, they do not like to be told that. No one likes to be told that he's in error. And I was warned that we have to crawl before we can walk. However, I also know that the tortoise has to stick his neck out before he gets in place. We have a night clerk down there for the first time since I've been down there. One of our registrars was supposed to teach her for 2 nights. I don't think she'd ever been in a hospital before. The night clerk reported to me that she did not feel that she had been taught, that instead the registrar slept on the floor. Am I talking too fast?
No, because we only have a short time.
I'm very sorry, but stop me if any time. There was a cot in the room. When I first went down, I went in and I assisted the registrar in making her bed. I think it was 3 mornings. The office is very small. And after about the 4th morning, I resented having to make her bed, help her make her bed, and to wake her up, to get her out of bed, so to speak. So I told her to go ahead, I would just work around her. As soon as I was given the position I thought that was vested in me as responsible for all the duties of the registry, the chairman of the registry committee asked me to please have that cot removed from the room, that they were not supposed to sleep. We were supposed to be working down there. I also asked for vouchers for our checks. The first check I received, I was not given a voucher. The night clerk also asked for a voucher, and she was not given a voucher. That was for the month of July. Since we were not given vouchers, we reported it to the chairman of the registry committee. She took it up in a meeting and requested that the bookkeeper give us vouchers. In other words, as much as $100 or more would be taken out of our checks, and we had no way of knowing where the money was going, and we thought we were entitled to know. When I first went to the registry, I was notified that one of the local hospitals was considering removing her nurses, so to speak, from the registry and having her own registry. I was real interested in finding out just how many nurses belonged to this hospital, and to see if I couldn't do something to maintain these nurses on our registry and to help this particular hospital, and to show her that we were vitally interested in supplying her nurses and competent nurses. And I asked one of the registrars for a list of these nurses so that I would know. Let's say if we have 250 nurses going to this hospital, that would mean 250 times $35. In other words, we would not get that revenue. At that time, I told her that the administrator of the hospital wanted it because wanted the information, because he was on his way to Europe, and he had told the director of nursing that when he came back from Europe that he was definitely going to make some changes if we did not improve. I did all I could to improve, and I was told by the director of the hospital that I made a valiant effort, but it came too late. Now they have their own registry. They do call us occasionally. When I was trying to make amends, so to speak, for years gone by, one of the supervisors called one of the registrars and told her that she had tried to get me for an hour and a half this particular morning, and she was not able to get me, and that I must have been awfully busy. The registrar replied she was busy thanking the private duty nurses for voting for her. As a rule, I don't pay any attention to gossip, but since this came directly, I asked the supervisor the next morning over at Georgia Baptist, namely Miss Holly, if this was correct, and she said indeed it was, and I have it in writing. In the first place, you cannot remove the telephone from it's a rotary system, and you can't stop your telephone. In the second place, the registrar was not there with me, so she had no way of knowing whether or not the telephone was off the hook. There, it appears that the registrars are used to doing exactly what they please and when they please to do it. They change their time whenever it pleases their convenience. As a matter of fact, it was done just today. Not that I expected to be requested, but I could have at least been, it seems that I'm due a bit of courtesy and not just left a note saying, Mrs. White, I'm working 3 to 11 today. Mrs. So-and-so has something planned. They work out their schedule to please themselves. Also, would you like to know the people who are being sent out who are not licensed practical nurses who are being set out from the registry. I think Miss Garland has this already. Would you like it again, Miss Garland?
Well, I don't know. I didn't know that do I have it?
Yes, you have it.
Do
Mm-hmm. Or is my time up?
Well, Miss White, two or three different times you quoted Miss Garland as sitting in on a meeting and hearing this and hearing that.
Yes.
But when Miss Garland sat in on that meeting, she had no right to open her mouth, and I'm sure she didn't. So I don't think Mrs. Garland should be put in quite like I feel that you're trying to class her, that she could have stopped something. See, because Miss Garland had no business of opening her mouth, and she knew it, so she kept still. When you sit in on a meeting, when you don't belong, as a rule, they ask you to sit over on one side. I've gone to too many meetings because I wasn't of the group, and I went for my own personal information. I sat on the side, so I'm sure that's what Miss Garland. So let's just forget the different times that Mrs. Garland has been at the meeting. She was only there just to try to learn for herself, see. But she had no right to say anything.
Mrs. Mace, you're entirely right, and I do offer you my apologies, Miss Garland. I'm sorry.
I was ex officio.
I understand that, and I'm very sorry. Well, then let me go ahead and give you this gentleman's name. His name is Mr. Murad. He's been set out from the registry on various cases. He is not a licensed practical nurse. I'm not familiar with our insurance policies. I don't know whether they will cover him or not in case he gives the patient the wrong medicine or lets the patient fall out of bed and fracture his skull. I don't know a thing about our insurance policies. And I have it in writing right here, the cases he's sent on, and I have it in writing right here. Mr. Narad called Mr. Cobble. Here's his residence number and his phone number. And Mr. Narad has called me on numerous occasions for cases. As a matter of fact, the first time I went up, he called me and told me this was Mr. Narad from Dallas, Georgia. And thinking he was one of our male nurses, I asked him what I could help him with, and he said he was ready for another case. And then I looked and realized we only had one male nurse on the registry. He said he had been receiving his cases from the registry, and he and one of the registrars, whom he named, had a little deal on the side. And I told him I was awfully sorry that I wasn't familiar with a little deal on the side, and he'd have to call back on the afternoon shift. This Mr. Murad has called me several times since and said he was ready for a case. I have checked on him. He is not a licensed practical nurse. He charges $1.69 an hour, and I wondered how he arrived at $1.69 an hour, and I looked it up on an LPN billhead, and that's what they charge. And I have the information right here. Norrod. I have his telephone number, and I've talked to him on numerous occasions. Also,
well, Miss White, may I say this? The first time you talked to him, you should have put him square then and straight, that he was not to call again because he was not on the register, and you people did not have time to take care of him. So that should have ended him. That's the way that should have been handled. Not giving him an opportunity to call the second time. That's only business, because him calling back all the time, and you as an official register had that right. And
Mrs. Mace, I'm delighted to know that you think I had that right, but when someone tells me they have been up there 16 years...
But when you're in there being paid in that capacity, that's the way I feel about anyone that is taking a salary. Then they should take the responsibility along with the salary, and that was your right, a right, and you did not use your right, because you did have that right and would have had the backing as the secretary, as the executive administrator there at the official register.
Mrs. Mace, frankly, I don't know.
Miss Mace.
Miss Mace, excuse me, Miss Mace. Pardon me. Frankly, I don't know how much authority is vested in me because when I type up a directive or ask someone to do something, they immediately call someone else, or they go down and see the president of the 5th District. For example, I'm handed a number of cards. Here we are, right here. I'm handing them a group of cards, saying, sign these cards so we can pass them out in case while you're off duty. I'm supposed to know if the executive secretary of the 5th District has passed on these persons before I sign these cards.
Well, I feel quite sure she hasn't, so she'd have no authority to.
Well, I'm throwing those cards to sign them, so I refuse to do this. However, the person who threw these cards at me to sign them, I beg your pardon, she did not throw them to me, she handed them to me to sign them, went down to see the 5th District of the Georgia State Nurses Association about this.
I've never heard about it before.
Yeah,
I've never
Susan.
seen one of them. They must have gone to the state because it's never been to my office.
And the,
I've never seen the call.
and this
No.
official
At any
register
time.
is not under the state, it's under the district. The
She did,
district,
I did not,
the president and
Ms.
the executive board are under the jurisdiction of the state. But the register and the register committee, where our trouble is right now, is the register committee sidestepping our president and the executive board with a great many things and a great things that should have been brought. Everything must come and be settled because the president and the board are responsible legally for everything. But the state does not have anything to do with it other than coming back on the president. See?
Miss Mace, I beg your pardon, perhaps I was in error. The party went to see the president of the 5th District.
No, I'm the president of 5th District. I've never seen that card.
No, I don't mean that she took you the cards, Miss Garland. But she went to see it to complain about my work. And it seems that no matter what I do, they call up someone else and ask about it. For example, I brought this along. It says half-year dues apply only to the newly graduated nurse who has not passed her state board examinations. I tried to explain them to them. When I left at 3 o'clock, they immediately called 2 other people.
Well, I think this should be brought in front of the registrars as a whole. See, when they're in here, that's the only way we can clarify things. Is for let them to know the things that have not been right, and that isn't right. When you're in there, and as I say, you are accepting the salary of an executive person, see, and then you should have take the authority of being that and seeing that those things it should have come into the board that it could have been handled.
Miss
See?
Mays, frankly, I don't feel I have any authority whatsoever.
Well, you should, though. You should.
I really don't. When I have to go in and move out of bed to keep my people from sleeping on duty, and they report to me, the night clerk reported to me that this registrar had never reported to her on time, had never, and she's been there since the 17th of August, and not once has she been on duty on time. And I asked her to please come on duty on time. Sunday morning she came in at 7:15, and the night clerk said, Mrs. So-and-so, I'll miss my bus. And she said, why don't you just go ahead and leave the door open. That's all right, go ahead and leave. And the night clerk said, Mrs. White, I couldn't do that. She said, I didn't get home till 9 a.m. Sunday morning after working all night. I don't think they realize, Miss Mays, I don't want to put myself on, I don't mean to put myself on the defensive, but they don't realize, Miss Mays, that I'm in charge of the office.
Yes, but you should make them realize that. That is your duty.
Miss Mays, I tried that. And one of the
All right, then,
registrars
but
called the chairman of the 5th District and
The register committee?
of the registry committee.
All right, let's just the registered committee and not the fifth district.
I meant the
There's a
registered,
difference.
registered committee. But they really, Mrs. Mays, they feel that they have been there so long that no one is to make any changes whatsoever. We had every private duty nurse calling up from the various floors, reporting nurses off duty and also ordering nurses for various shifts. Well, when I went there, Mrs. Mays, I tried to tell them very graciously, well, now, you know, this has to go through, it so happens at St. Joseph's, it has to go through admissions. You know, this has to be put through admissions to be official, or this has to go through the nursing service. I can't call a nurse for that patient until it's put through officially. They were astounded. They had not heard of such a thing. Incidentally, I was told by the chairman of the registry committee to work each shift so that I would get an idea about the problems that came up on 3 to 11 and 11 to 7. And they were very antagonistic about it. They were very adamant. They said I was not to work 3
Well,
to
may
11.
I
was
ask you
not
this
to work
question?
11 to 7.
When the chairman of that committee asked you to work that, were you paid for working those shifts?
Yes, I was, Ms.
Well,
Mays.
then she had no right to authorize you to work without it coming through our president and the board. She
Well-
does not have that right. She does not have the right to spend one dime without it being
Well, I meant she was paid the
recommended
regular
to the board.
salary, Mrs.
Well, that's
Mays.
what I know.
Regular
That's
salary.
what I know. But even then, it must all come through. There's where all of our trouble is, Mrs. White. There's where all of our trouble is. The registered committee has bypassed the board so many times just for things like that. That's why there's no money today. Is, you know, spending and not knowing where it was spending. Now, I'm not, if you worked, you should have been paid, but it should have been, what I'm trying to point to you is the error of it not being brought and given the permission and let it gone out officially that you were requested to do, and then you would have had authority. Where when they knew it wasn't done right, they felt that why should they take
The registry committee gave me authority.
Yes, I know,
Mrs.
but the
Mays.
registered committee had no right to give you the authority unless it went through the executive board.
Oh, I misunderstood, Mrs.
See?
Mays.
They had no right to, they could recommend it to the executive board, and then the executive board would notify you. They thought it was necessary, see, that, for you to spend those shifts with the different ones. And then it would have all been legal, and you would have been in a position that you could have demanded your rights. And when they knew it wasn't, so that's the only way I can see it. Sister, how do you see it? That's right, sister. See, that's what's the matter right now. It has not. I think it was good to have had you to. For
She
you
wanted me to
determine.
learn, Mrs. Mays.
Yes, I
Miss
know, but
Mays.
she had no right to ask you to unless she had permission of the spending the money. See?
Well, Miss Mays, may I say one thing? I want to cooperate fully.
I know you do. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that.
But because some of the people have been down there 15 or 16 years, for example, these deals right here, the executive secretary told me that she spent all morning to make sure this was right. It was one Friday morning, and I explained it to them, and they still didn't believe it. As soon as I left at 3 o'clock, they called up.
Well, I could only say this much. I am in my 27th year in the position I'm holding, and I still feel that I must be under the people that employed me. As not an executive board, but the executive board is the one that should have give the appointments, say, either accept or reject a name that's given. And then everything, the spending money, comes under them. And then that puts you in a clear position.
Mrs. Mace, I feel I'm under the executive board.
Yes, but when you do things like that, you have disobeyed.
Now, what do you mean, like
the
this,
executive
like
board.
this? This came
What
from the
I'm talking
board.
about, what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, you saying the registrars didn't pay attention to you when you were working on the shifts with them. That was all wrong because that did not come to the board. The board did not sanction that.
Well, my mistake
That I
was through
understand.
ignorance because the registry committee told me to do it, you see.
Well, that's why I'm saying
So
that. That's
ma'am,
where
that
so
was-
much of our trouble is coming. See, as if bypassing the right channel.
Well, I am
I
perfectly willing
feel
to
now
help
we've
you
given
clear
as much.
it up.
Well, let's see the next, and then all get together, because my time, I know all of your time's limited, but I'm supposed to be on duty, and I know Sister is, and I know Miss Garland is,
All right.
and we're paying Miss Adkins. We know she's supposed to be down
Thank you, Miss
at the Healy
Mays.
Building, and we
Thank you.
appreciate you coming, and if you can give us
Thank you
any of
very
this in writing, we would like to have it. Anything
you
that
can
you
have-
have there
you
that
can
you've
have it all
talked
in
to us
writing.
about, we
You
would like for
certainly
you
may.
to separate it and give it to us.
Certainly will. May I separate it later, please?
You may,
Thank you very much.
you may, and if you just tell whichever one wants to come next, to come down, and then
All
we'll
right.
get all of you back in here as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Miss Garland. May I say in closing that the night clerk has been discouraged, and they have suggested to her that she quit and apply to one of your hospitals as a telephone operator. Instead of encouraging her, she has been discouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
I'll wait out. You want me to wait
Just
out?
yes, and ask one of the other registrars to come down.
Thank you.
It doesn't make any difference which one comes. Maybe it'd be best if Miss Orton's out there, she comes last, and then she won't have to go down the hall again.
Good. Thank you.
And then she can just stay and I'll go get the rest, all of you back.
Are you Sister Mary Christian?
Yes.
Kellum. I've talked with you.
We
Yes.
call,
And
talk.
you know Miss Garland.
Yes, I spoke to her.
Well, Miss Kellum, have you got any problems that you would like to tell us? Or anything that you think would be a help to us to settle this, get this straightened out and to retain our register?
Well, I want to see it retained, but the thing that has upset me in the 16 years that I've been up there, it's the first time that I have met with this in that Miss White wouldn't cooperate when she first came up there. She came in the first day, and I resented that. She came in, and I asked her if she didn't want to look over the desk. That's our first problem. And she said that, no, she took her orders from the registry committee. Well, that kind of hurt you. So I didn't say much else then. I said, well, it's unusual for a person to come in when they haven't been appointed by the board to go through personal files. See, she went through the files and got all of those personal things in there and made copies, had photostatic copies of some of them. And I resented that. It hurt me. And I said, Miss White, that's not right. And she says, Miss Kellum, I have told you I take my orders from the registry committee. Well, you know, it makes you feel bad when you've been up there so long to be treated that way. So I didn't say much else to her until she started home with some of the things. And I called her hand then. Because I think the most important thing up there is filling the calls. That's what we were taught.
That's right. That's what you're there for.
That's what we're there for. Well, and then people called me and told me different things she said about, I don't know whether she said them or not. I didn't hear her say them, about me being too old and peculiar and that it was time for me to retire, which is true. I am old, but I had felt that I was doing a good job up there. I was doing the best I could. Help's been hard to get.
That's right.
And I understand several people have called me and said that I was being criticized for giving calls to people that were not on the registry. Well, I have. I've given them their number to call. Now, you take a person in home. I had this mother call me one time, and 3 of the children were sick, and the mother and the father. And I couldn't get a nurse to go out there. One had diphtheria, and the other had flu. They didn't know whether the child would go into diphtheria or not. And so I said, well, and let me call you back. And I called everybody I could think of. And then I said, well, I can give you this number to call. She's not on the registry, but if you want to call her, it'll be someone to stay with you. I said, I know her, and she was a colored nurse. And I said, she worked in the Valley. That's West Point down there. I'm from that, and it's a section of Milltown's. And I said, she's worked down there, and she's good, and I know you can depend on her. So she called her, and she went out and stayed with them and took care of them. Well, you know, I just think it's terrible if you can't help people when they need it without being criticized.
Well, Mrs. Kellum,
I don't know
will
whether
say-
you all have heard that or
Well,
not.
well, Mrs. Kellum, I'll say this. I feel that when you did that, it was more as a friend and not the official register. When you were taking care of something in a home, it was not from a professional standpoint. You were sending somebody to help out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, she called her, though, Miss Mace. I didn't call her.
that's
I
what-
gave
that's what
her
I
the
say.
telephone number.
That's what I
But
say.
now
You
I
did not
did
call.
call a colored nurse one time from my home and give her
Yeah,
case.
she-
But I've given.
But she didn't get the case. That colored woman told me that. I called her.
Oh, you
She
did?
said, uh-huh. I was given the telephone number, and
First
I
time
called
I've
her,
been
and she said
investigating.
somebody had
Told-
had gotten the case.
Oh, is that it?
And said she never bothered calling you back. I had
Uh-huh.
just told sister and them that while we were waiting.
Well,
So-
those are some of the things that I might have done wrong, but I like to sleep when I go home.
Well, Miss, I don't think that was wrong because it was not connected with the register. Not any of it was registered business, and you weren't even there.
No,
and it
but
was
Miss
down-
Mace, if it had been registry business and I couldn't get a nurse, don't you think I was justified in giving them a name of someone that might help them, or do you? I can
I
take
do-
constructive criticism.
Well, I think that you were justified because you were not doing it through the register, and there were not people that were connected.
Mhm.
And when there was a whole house full ill, I do feel that as angels of mercy, what we're called, you don't show that side of you if you,
You
don't
really
try to
don't.
help
And you
them.
know, it's terrible to sit up there and have the doctor call you and have the family call you and the neighbors call you. You're going to do everything you can to help them. So I don't know who, I looked for the names up there. I was going to give it to this friend of mine from down home. She wanted to take a nurse home with her, but I couldn't find it. And so I don't know whether Ms. White removed those names from the file, or how did you find,
Well,
did she? Well, it's all right with me because I have many things to hide. But it's things like that that I have resented. She's been underhanded about things. I believe in being open and above board about things and being honest. I've always been able to take constructive criticism. We've always had trouble at the registry. I've been up there 16 years. We've had trouble. But I have found that if you tell the truth about things and if you're open and above board about it, it's all right. And I've told Miss White, I said, now don't tell the nurses that. But she resented my telling her things because, and this is another thing that came pretty straight, and I've understood Miss White better since then. Now, a member told me that was at one of the meetings that they had told Miss White when they appointed her registrar that she was going to meet with opposition and just to go up there and show them who was who, that she was chief registrar and that she was in charge. And she came in with that attitude. So, and I told Miss White, and Miss White got, so mad. She said it was a plain lie. But I don't know the way she acted. I think that she did. Now, they had never paid a nurse extra hours for taking work home. And I don't resent the extra time I've given up there because I used to relieve Miss John. I've relieved, and I'd help Miss Dixon even when she was up there. I never resented doing extra hours if I could help anyone. I wanted to do it. But she even charges for a quarter of an hour, or half an hour, and she'll add up the time that she's taken home. And she says she works for a mere pittance now. She is mercenary, Miss Mays. She'll tell you that, I think. She doesn't think that the first day she was up there, she wanted the salaries, something done about the salaries. And when she got to be chief, she was going to see that they made more money. Well, now, she criticized Ms. Vaughn, and I resented that because she said that registry was in a mess when she got up there. Well, it's still in a mess, if you want to know the truth. But Ms. Vaughn was carrying out Ms. Hicks' orders. She had notations on all of those cards and saying that to let this one go ahead and work such and such a time, and that she would get her physical. She put the date down of the times
did
when
that?
she had. Ms. Vaughn put that on the card.
But you said
Ms.
Ms. Hicks
Hicks.
told her that.
Ms. Hicks
Ms.
told
Hicks
her.
had
Ms.
no
Hicks
right
told.
as a chairman to say that.
Well, but you can see why we resented it. It's little things like that. And if you'd tell her things, she'd say, well, they had told her that. I didn't talk to Ms. Hicks myself because, I don't know, there's just a little something that had come up that Ms. Hicks kind of resents me. But I know others had talked to Ms. Hicks. Now, Miss White is doing better. 3 days ago, last Thursday, was the first time that I followed her that the calls checked. She has not been careful about the way she'd check them, and she hasn't written the time so that when a doctor called in to see when a nurse was sent on a case, we'd see that nurse checked off. It's funny the way it works up there, but if you don't follow a system, it's hard. And we had doctors call and want to know when she was called, and we had no way of knowing because she'd put her on the sheet at 8:30, and she wouldn't be marked off on the other book. And I'd tell her about that. But now she would call Miss Hinton, this late person, and tell her things to do when she should have told me because I was the next one in charge. Miss Hinton has been up there. I resented that. Now, I'm sorry. I know I'll have to do a lot of praying, but I tell you, I resented that because the registry committee gave her the power of employing a person when she hadn't been up there long enough to know what the work was. Now, that was
The
wrong.
committee did not, I say again, the register committee has bypassed the executive board, which our president is the head. And if it had been brought to the executive board each time, we wouldn't be having the trouble we're having now. See?
Well, she said that the registry committee gave her that power, and she got this person up there, and I really feel sorry for her. It's really not her fault because Miss White doesn't expect things of her. Now, they pay her $250 a month, and she thinks that it's just wonderful they could get a person like that up there for $250 a month. Well, she brings the names over in pencil. She writes the calls off. She writes fairly well with pen, but she doesn't check the calls yet. She doesn't know how, and that's all she does. She was supposed to hire someone to help with the typing, and she hasn't typed one thing since she's been up there. Now, we have to do her work. I don't mind it. I'm glad to, but you know it's just unfair. And I'm sorry.
No, you don't need to be.
Well, I really hate
Miss
it.
McCallum, we thank you. And if you'll send Miss Benberger
Well,
in.
this is the first time I've been investigated in the 16 years I've been up there. And I tell you, I
But
don't...
wouldn't you rather turn it off? Because what I'm
chair? The hot seat, huh?
No, we don't feel that way.
No, we just had to
just
kid
was
about
praying.
sure, I
We don't
should
feel
say.
that way.
Just fine. He went to Dr. Staten yesterday. He said he's doing just fine. Just doing just beautifully.
This is Miss
Brandenburger.
I talked to you on the telephone.
Yes,
and
that's
Isn't that
right.
terrible? Wouldn't even
Uh-huh.
known you.
Well, so many of the girls we talked to and the nurses, we just,
That's right. Well, do you know of anything that you could say to us that would help the three poor, crippled people to straighten things out?
well, I wish you'd ask me some questions first, and then the things that you've heard about us, then maybe that would.
Well, I think, though, things that we hear are, we can't go on hearsay.
That's right.
If you have things in writing, you would try to clear, and what you have that didn't pertain to
That's
you.
right.
See, so therefore, but if there's anything, and if there isn't, we're not trying to probe anything out of you, or anything like that. If there's anything that would be constructive that you could give to us, that we could help us come with something to the board, because we were appointed by the board, come to the board that would help straighten out the official register so that we could carry on.
Well, of course, I went to Miss Garland with some of my complaints after I couldn't get any results from Ms. Hicks. Of course, that was my complaints. Of course, each one of us had probably have different complaints, and I expect Miss Garland has told you the complaints that I had given her, and I had given her a couple of notes that were given out to us. So my main complaint, of course, since I'm not going to be here, of course, I feel an interest in the registry. We've been there so long. I'm kind of like Ms. Kellum. We've just kind of grown up with her. Of course, she's been there longer than I have. But I think it's just of course, it's been unpleasant for us with the actions with the way Miss White has dealt with a few of the ways that we've been used to doing. And I've always felt that she didn't consider us at all. Of course, we've heard that she didn't get any cooperation from us, but if you don't have somebody to cooperate with you, you just can't cooperate with them. And I understand she came up with a feeling that put on her fighting clothes and fight, and I guess that she felt like that's what she was going to do. And so, as I say, my main complaint was that about this vacation time. That's where it first started, really. And I felt that since I was relief nurse, that I should have been asked about the vacation time, what we had planned to do, because before Ms. White came up there, the vacations had been planned, and I went off in August and planned to come back to relieve Mrs. Kellum and then to relieve Mrs. Orton. And then all of a sudden I walk up there I get up the office, and on the note on the desk there's a note that Miss Orton's to take her vacation that day. So I asked her about it, and she said, well, it was in the book, the little green book, that she was supposed to have a vacation. And I said, well, it had already been planned, and Miss Orton didn't want to go off. And she said, well, she had to start right that day. And so, of course, that kind of disturbed me a little bit, because I had my plans made, and she hadn't said a word to us. That was the trouble. She would never ask us anything, her advice or anything. Of course, I expect since she was chief registrar, she could do as she just intended or expected to do, or pleased, rather. So then I just called Miss Hicks, and Miss Hicks said, well, it was in the book. And I still felt disturbed about it, and that's when I went up to Miss Garland and just told her that it's the same thing I'm telling now. I may have had a little bit more, I don't know, but Miss Garland will know that. But, and I told Miss Garland, as far as the money was concerned, it wasn't that I needed the money, but it was just a principle. Because we had been up there long enough, and we kept the registry open when Miss Joyner died, and then when Miss Vaughn left, I felt like that we were doing a fairly good job of it. And then to think that somebody would come in and just take over and just, well, regardless, we were nothing, she was just going to do as she pleased. And Miss Orton did not want her vacation then. She had plans for it. And I don't think that's right for somebody to come up and just say, well, you just have to take it now. And this was not an emergency.
And then getting these other nurses in, that had never had an experience. Of course, Miss Sander had, but Miss Ramsey didn't have any experience. And just bringing somebody in like that, well, to me, that wasn't the right thing to do.
Wasn't right.
And that kind of bothered me because we were used to working up there. Everybody cooperated with each other. If one wanted an extra hour relief, we'd relieve for her. Nothing was said. We didn't fuss about it or anything, or we didn't demand overtime. We didn't and anything. And we didn't complain. Maybe we complained to ourselves. And I know there's a lot of headaches up there, but we were able to solve pretty much of the headaches. Where you get a group of women, you have a little bit of fussing, but we were able to solve it. And, I think I told Miss Garland that was my main. What else was it, Miss Garland? And I said, I've forgotten.
That's the main.
That was the main. And then, when she first came up there, I told her the first day, I said, Ms. White, I said, now if you come up here, I said, don't think that you can turn the office upside down or set the world afire, because I said, this is a place that you can't. I said, you have to see how we do things, because the offices are different. And I said, this is entirely different than private duty nursing. And I said, now, if you'll just go along with us and just watch how we're doing and just get the gist of it, and then it'll be all right. And, then different things went on. But now that's what I did tell her in the beginning.
Good advice.
Yeah, well, I felt like it was, because I don't think a new person can come in any office and just, well, now I'm going to change this, now I'm going to change that. I think you have to learn the people and then gradually win them over. But then, of course, the first thing, she went with the files. And so that bothered me, because I knew that none of the files were to be exposed, because everything up there is confidential. Nothing is supposed to go out of that office. And that was drilled into us with Miss Joyner. And I had my training under Miss Joyner, and I believe I got marvelous training.
I know you did.
And so that bothered me, and I felt like I was responsible. And then I called Miss Hicks, and I told her, I said, well, now, if anything's said, been told from out of this office, now, I'm not responsible for that, 'cause I told Miss White that nothing was supposed to go out. Now, I don't know whether things went out. We understand their heads, but I don't know. So that bothered me. So all little things just gradually went together that were not the way that we were used to. And I know it came back to us, and I'll tell you a few things came back to us. That we didn't want her up there. Well, that wasn't it. Of course, Miss Hicks would ask us to try to find somebody, and we'd ask different ones if they'd like to come up, and we finally got one that we thought would come up, and of course, we were real pleased. Well, and when they called and told us that this other registrar was coming up, why, it wasn't that we disliked her. It isn't that, because we didn't know her, but we just felt like that we should have somebody cooperate with us, too. And we felt like we should have a little bit of consideration. We've been there long. We were able to take care of it before. Well, why weren't we able to take care of that with somebody else over us in the right way? And then taking some of the responsibilities away from us, just little things that meant a lot to us. Now, we could have helped her a lot with all this typing that she'd had done, or mailing out or filling out these envelopes, stuffing them and such like, because that's what we used to do. If it wasn't finished in one shift, well, the next nurse would do it.
That's the way it's supposed to
That's
be.
right. And
It's always been like that.
so those little things, and it's been so many little things that have come up that I've forgotten quite a few things. Just little things, probably it wouldn't bother anybody else, but it did us. Now, if there's something else you want to ask me that you probably have heard, why, I wish you'd ask me, because maybe then I could think of something else.
No, when work is passed from one shift to the other, that is the only way that you can keep efficiency. Because if each shift had to stay until something was completed,
Sure.
well, I don't know where institutions would be.
Well, you couldn't.
When our nurses, 4 o'clock, when we change, what isn't done is turned over to the next shift, and the morning the same way.
Sure.
And there's not a word back.
Mm.
They're to pick right up and go on.
Sure.
And that's the only way you could run your register
Well, now,
efficiently.
for instance, now all of us have been writing up the receipts for the books or the dues. The cards have been signed by the chief registrar. To my knowledge, I have never given a card out to anybody that hadn't paid their 5th district dues. We've been doing all that for all these years. Well, then all of a sudden, she said she wasn't going to sign those cards, that she was going to know everything was going out. Well, I said, for very near 10 years we've been doing this, now they don't trust us. Well, now that's the feeling that we had. Well, now we've always signed the receipts for your bill heads. We've mailed them out. If the nurse that would come up at 7 o'clock, she'd pick up the mail. The nurse that came up at 3 o'clock would pick up the mail. Well, she told Ms. Kellum one day not to pick up the mail that she would take, and then she would take it home. Well, to us, the mail shouldn't go out. Well, we never knew whether there was any bill heads to be sent out. We could have been doing all those. If she had that and was doing it, well, that was extra work for her. Well, if she'd have gone ahead and we kept continue the way we were doing, we would be helping her. But you can't help anybody if you don't know what to do. So that's where we felt it.
Miss Van Berger, for myself and for the other members, I appreciate the comments you've made. I think it'd be very helpful in us finishing up our study. And we promise you your name will not
Well-
be used. What we're trying to get is a general information to use as a report, and we'll take the responsibility.
Well, now, I'm not going to lie about anything because I don't want anybody to lie about me.
No.
And if you don't mind, let me say
fine.
this. I have told, since I've heard several things that went out, that they had bribed us to get cases and things like that. Well, that is not so. Because
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
some nurse came back from one of your meetings, and she called me up, and she said that she had gotten up and said about a case that this man that was wealthy, and I just didn't pay too much attention to it. And I made this remark to the girl, to this nurse. I said, well, as long as I've been up here, there's not a soul that's offered me anything. I said, well, that's strange to me that all of a sudden somebody new come in and this happened. I'll grant you, we have had coffee pots given to us for out there for all the registrar. We've had a Bible. We've had religious books given to us. We've had flowers. We've had food. We've had Christmas gifts. Well, anybody gets that. That isn't bribery.
That's not bribery.
So, and that has bothered me. And I said, now, I went up there with a clear name, and I am going out with a clear name. Because now I'm not going out having them say that I took money, I took presents or gifts for giving people cases. Because now I just feel that way, and I just don't think that's right. If that has been said.
It has been.
So now that's one thing I think that they should make clear to all the nurses that we did not do anything like that, because one nurse will tell something and add a little bit more to it, and it's going to be that much worse. And that's what I feel concerned about, because I just didn't like it. Because I am, like I said before, I am not going to lie about a thing. I'm telling the truth. And that's just it. And there are probably other things, if I could think of it, that little things that maybe would come up that you would want to ask, and I would lie about it all. Because I just don't like it if anybody that's back, that will do things behind your back. Now, what did I tell you? I told you about this little book. This is just petty things. I know you all probably think they're petty things. We have this book up here that has all the, we will call one a refused call book. All the calls are when the nurses refuse. We have a notebook over here, it's notes. We put in there like, if there's a new telephone number to be changed, we write that down, and whoever changes it, just scratches it off with red. We have things that have been said, and if somebody's coming up, or just little messages. Well, in that book up there, there's pages torn out between a Thursday and a Saturday. I can't tell you what was on them, but there's things that we have written from a Thursday to Saturday that have disappeared. But I'm sure there's some numbers, but I just wish I knew what was on. But it bothered me to think that somebody would tear them out. And I said to Miss White then, I said, well, Miss White, there's pages in this book that have been torn out. And she says, well, I haven't had time to look. And I said, well, they're gone. She said, well, maybe it was trash. I said, well, there's nothing, there's not any trash in this book. See, and just those, and getting nurses behind your back, and doing little things that, because we worked with each other. We would tell each other things. We'd report to each other. Well, and like I said, we've had headaches up there, but we didn't let it bother us too much. Maybe we did fuss, but who isn't going to fuss a little bit? So That's my story there. I just turned it off. We asked you to come last, and you wouldn't have to walk down the hall the
Good.
second time.
Miss Orton, we're glad to have you. And we just want to ask you this one simple question. Do you have anything that you could say that would throw any light on our problems with the official register that you would care to give us? You do not need to speak unless you want to.
Well, it's just a little break in public relations at times, and being sincere in the far as job employment and job security. Sometimes you don't feel like some of the job relations are secure, and then sometimes you feel that the things are done without authority, backing of the board, and they take action before it has had board action. That's what I questioned from the beginning. And then asking me all at once before she was officially put onto the registry to get the list of the Georgia Baptist registrars' names, the ones that were officially registered with us. And so I wouldn't type it up because I wasn't a good enough typist to do it. And she said, well, you just refused to do it. I said, I didn't say that, Ms. White. I said, I just wanted to have the proper backing to do it, and I just felt like the board hadn't had a chance to take action on it. And I knew Mr. Peel was in Europe at the time that she had requested the list of names, and even though he might have had it inspired and transpired before he left and things working and long distance calls, I just questioned that first thing without the proper authority. And then other overtime things that have come up. I wasn't opposed to the overtime as long as the shift wasn't covered, but it's this overtime when take it out to write a lot of little notes, and you have to spend your first 15 minutes after you get to work reading little notes that she could tell you about the next day. And then instead of asking us things that she didn't know, she just would go ahead and do, and otherwise just show that she was in the authority instead of others. In other words, the way to do things and where it would be understood, just a routine working of the things that would make the registry more workable. And then bringing in an inexperienced tail all at once was what threw us. And then we had my vacation planned. We'd gone 2.5 months without any fourth registrar to relieve 3 of us. There was vacations that were taken in there, and we had only 3 people to work the 3 shifts. Well, that gave us about 1 or 2 days off a month. And then all at once, she begins showing more of her authority by then forcing me to take my vacation. In other words, if I'd just known it one payday to the next, where I wouldn't have had the shortage of funds toward my vacation plan, well, I would have been better satisfied about it. But as it was, I had to give her the answer. Get your calendar right now and give me your answer right now over the telephone. Well, she could have told me as a person about it. Seems she can't face us with face talking. She has to give us little notes to upset us at the beginning of each shift. So she's got a little better about that the last few meetings. Just since she found out that the job security came with the board's recommendation, she's been a little more humble to the position she holds.
Do you have anything else? I feel the points that you've given us will be beneficial in the committee trying to write up a report for the executive board. I'll say the same thing to you, that this committee feels that if everything had gone through the executive board as it should, I don't believe we would be having quite as much confusion as we're having right now.
Then I question the hiring of the inexperienced help at night that I feel is incapable of meeting the public relations of the office, so to speak, because it goes on 24 hours a day, and it becomes the registry's responsibility, the weakest link, and it becomes an atmosphere for the whole registry. And then we have these problems of our older nurses and fitting them into the right positions. And they're on our register, they're paid up, they pay their alumni dues, they pay their registry dues, and they come up seniority of line of getting out on the call. Well, I think that is part of the influence of our one institution pulling out, is to eliminate maybe 3 undesirables in their whole alumni group. Well, we would just seniority, send them out regardless. You know, try to get them off the register. Well, we're there to fill our cases and put our nurses to work the best we can and try to, you know, fill them with the right cases. But I guess we should do like Emory, is to clear with the nursing personnel to see, well, there's maybe a dozen that we have to clear with them. Say, well, is this case, is she adequate for this case? Well, we'll run into difficulties with practical nurses as well as the RNs on being an adequate situation for a hard case or one that's a moderate case. And then another is recently we've had the orders to not hold a case, say if the registrars are registry in, maybe the individuals, say for instance, are on the board. Well, we're not to hold that case, we just fill it as soon as we get the call from the hospital to fill starting at 3 o'clock tomorrow, say, round the clock. Well, we're supposed to fill it with those registrars that are registered in at 6 o'clock today, so to speak, instead of waiting for their own institution to fill it with their own institution nurses. Well, that's causing some disturbance. And then their own hospitals alumni can't understand why they sit on the register for 5 days. Well, maybe the individual's been on there a week. Well, it's my question just how fair it is to leave the individual here in the center on a week, whereas this one that's another hospital that comes on, well, she expects work the full 7-day-a-week program. They just choose to go on the 5-day schedule or something of them. I don't know how many have pulled out, but we can say, for instance, we have some that will go to work at a certain hospital, and they're not members of the registry, but they're members of the alumni, and then they'll be relieved of that case because they're not members. Well, they can go to Piedmont and work all they want to, and sometimes they're not even members of the district. So that's my pet peeve. Why should we hold them off because they haven't had their physical exam? When the Emory, Crawford Long, Piedmont just reap our benefits. Otherwise, oh, that's to my glory. I've got one now. Got one the rest of the season. I know of 4. Well, we have registrants that are registering for other institutions at the time to their convenient location. There'd be 6 or 8 on for other institutions at all times. And if they can get work, in other words, when you go on registry, you want to go to work that day if you can. And there'll be some that we can't fill, well then they'll call up the Baptists and try to go to work that day. Other words, don't want to miss a shift here.
So they could call Baptist Director and for position.
Yes,
Since they have their own registry.
yes,
Are any of those girls on both registries?
yes. It's a complete registry just like Piedmont has, and
And they're on the official registry too,
yes,
at the same time?
yes, we give them services. They're 90. I counted them when I gave that report.
Well, then what happens
I just
if,
checked off on our little yellow book that Miss Adkins mailed out to each member.
suppose a nurse, a Baptist nurse is registered at both places and she's called from Baptist. Does she notify you that she's on duty for
Well,
Baptist?
I'll find it out accidentally by trying to put her to work or counting her for that 11 o'clock shift. And one had been working back and forth, and so I called her, and she says, "Well, Miss Orton, isn't this a late date to be calling me?" I says, "Well, I had to get the operator to give me your correct number at this." And she said, "Oh, I forgot." Says, "We had so many wrong numbers on the number we had. We asked for a new number, and I'm sorry I didn't give you my new number."
There's like a duplication of effort. If they're registered Georgia Baptist and they give them a case and you don't know they've given them a case, you're gonna be calling them, you know.
Counting on them, and then
Counting on them, it's gonna take time to find out that when, after a while, you try 2-3 times that they've got a case somewhere else. And then, when the registry dues are due again, I bet you lose some of these 90 people, they're probably just registered Georgia Baptist and not with the registry.
And one of my pet peeves is something happens that maybe your hospital needs to know about it. Well, maybe we've got till 12. In other words, at Emory, I make it a point. I like to. They know my habits now that I will notify them in time for them to fill their emergency calls with staff nurses if they can find them, or somebody they know that will double. And so I don't worry them every time I fill a call. I'll wait till I can report 5 or 6. Just have a systematic time to call instead of doing it just every. And that's one thing I think Baptist fell out with them about. There's so many interruptions, and there wasn't any. There's just as soon as she found out something, she'd call them, and then we'd put somebody on. Well, wait till the last minute to report this certain person coming on. Well, they said, "Oh no, she is Miss So and So. She helped build this hospital. We can't put her on with this case." So we'd have to call up and cancel that particular person.
They have not officially given us any notice at all. They probably won't. Do you think that they will?
I don't think there's been an
I think
official
it's
notice of it.
I think it's a board there that control our salaries. That's controlling
What
this.
board?
The ones that controlled our salaries as employees at Baptist.
It wasn't carried to your alumni either.
No, it
You were
wasn't.
a graduate of Georgia
Yes.
Baptist, and
I've kept up with it.
calls too, that they resented that it was not brought before the alumni. When the alumni voted to go in during World War II, I happened to be Preston, and St. Joseph and Georgia Baptist came in during that time, which made it unanimous for our hospitals, and we're very happy about it.
And so if somebody feels very strongly that certain people should, in other words, if all they can take is a simple hysterectomy, or one that's coming out of recovery room and not be able to deal with the personality after she wakes up, well, I think it'd be good if we could clear it with nursing service before we put that certain person to work. And then there's some of the older ones getting fired after each shift.
Nice place
We
to
just hope
visit
we will
in
get
and not
more
to be
people.
sick in.
I was trying to tell someone the other day about an old hen and chickens I brought back from California. Well, that's the old hen, doesn't have the chickens, that's it. But then the little chickens grow on stems from around it. I don't know who I was talking to, but I'm going to tell them to come over and come to the conference room in San Jose and see what I was talking about. That, if we'll draw this to a close, if you young ladies do not have anything that you'd like to bring up, or the floor is open to you. If there's anything other than what you've already said that you would care to say.
What, for instance? I mean, anything special that you could ask us? I mean, that you.
No,
that we
I
didn't
feel,
say that-
no, I feel the reason why we didn't want to ask questions, we just wanted you to tell what you had on your mind or pinned up, and then we would have that to work from with all the other information that we have from many sources, many letters and things that have come in to us. So there really isn't anything, because we want you to feel free to either talk or not talk.
Well, I feel like since I'm going to leave, I don't have too much to say, so I think it's the ones that are gonna be there longer than I that follow up what I've already said, how I felt about it. Since I'm
Well,
going-
maybe why are you leaving? I heard you were leaving, but I've never been given a reason why.
Well, you know, I resigned 2 years ago. and then came
I
back,
remember that.
And, this, my work is every other Monday, every other Tuesday, every other Sunday. And if my husband is retired, and if we want to go off any place, you have to be back at a certain time. And of course, we've always worked it. If I wasn't back, the other girls would work that day and then get paid for it, or else when I came back, then I would give them that time. But I feel that, well, I've been there long enough, and I think that we'd kind of like to, I'd like to be free so we could just go about and just we wouldn't have to worry about coming back. Although I enjoyed being there, but I just feel like that after you're there during your 10 years, it's about time you would get.
That's what I think.
Well.
So I sent my resignation in, because I think it's time for me to leave.
I don't know whether
I've
it is
been
or not.
accused of being too old.
You've only been there, well,
16.
I don't think age should have a great deal to do with people's retirement. I think they should have good personal reasons for retirement, because I feel some of the best years are given after many years have been spent in a department, and I feel the employer is losing valuable help by accepting resignations due to age. And I think when they have a set age, personally I think it's wrong.
Of course, some people are younger, older when they're young and younger when they're older, for that matter. But now, like this, for the night nurse, I was talking to Ms. Hensley, and I said that I would think that somebody that, well, maybe their feet hurt them, but their head doesn't hurt them, that they could go up there, a nurse, even though she was 65.
That's
because
I
she
agree
could
with
talk
you.
intelligently to the people and would know what she was doing. But just because she's 65, wouldn't be any reason that she couldn't work up there at night, because she could do the work.
I agree with you.
And I think just because if you can't do private duty, there's something else that you could do. And I fully believe that's who should be up there, even though she is 65 or a little older. At night especially, because there isn't as much to do at night, although there's plenty to do at night, if you do what you're supposed to do.
That's right.
But, well, that's the way I feel about the people being old.
Well, I don't think it's a place for a lay person. I really don't.
I agree with you on that. It's no place for a person that does not know professional ethics.
That's right.
That's the reason why that I don't like practical nurses, because they are not taught professional ethics, and they overstep their bounds 1,000 times. And
they're just not dependable. This person we have up there, this Miss Hinton, she's been sick more than I have this year, and I'm older and supposed to be in feeble health now. But she's been out for sickness more than I have.
And then our practical nurses will be applying for the job too, now that they know we take laymen on the job. One says, well, I believe I'll put my application in if you're taking laymen on the job.
Just for the record, Mrs. Hinton has been sick 3 nights, and she came in, I believe it was the 17th of August.
Well, that's more than.
And this is October the, what is
But
it,
she was
29th?
She was out Saturday night too, Ms. Lane.
That, I'm including that 3 nights. She has been out 3 nights. The night clerk has been out sick 3 nights, and I believe she started to work the 17th of August, and this is October the 29th.
Well, but then we've been up there a year at a time and not off. We'd come up there with headaches and colds, or not that it would be contagious or anything, but when you just, lay people are that way. If they have a little pain or decide they want to do something, they have a good excuse and they'll call, and that's just natural where you have your lay person. If you take a professional person, they have more feeling for their position and know that it has to go on, just like a show has to go on. That's all there's to it. The same way with like a register.
Well, I think 3 nights off when she's only been employed 2.5 months doesn't speak very well for her. I'd say that in any, whether she's on your staff there or on my staff or sister's staff. Miss Atkins doesn't have a staff, but Mrs. Garland has a staff, and I would be looking around to get somebody to replace them if they were off 3 nights and they'd only been on my staff 2.5 months.
Well, that's why I think you really should have a nurse that is interested and knows that it will really do what she's supposed to do and not take advantage, or Miss Hinton may not take advantage, I don't know, but it seems strange that it's on a Saturday night. Of course, I said from the beginning, and I told Miss Garland, I said, well, you were just wasting your money, because she doesn't do the things that she's supposed to. I don't think that she came up there for. And I think when you're hired to do a certain thing, you're supposed to do that.
Agree.
I may be a little bit hard on, would be hard on employees, but I think when you're hired for a certain position, or, here I go speak again, I'm going to leave.
Now, does anyone else have anything, because it's necessary for us to finish up and get back.
I make a motion of a recommendation of doing away with the requirements for a physical as one of the requirements for entrance into the registry.
You know, that physical has been a bone of contention, and there's so many of the girls who haven't been fair about the way they've gotten theirs.
I agree with you on that. They can get a
And-
personal friend to write it.
Well, Miss May,
No, but-
some of the girls will have their physicals to say, now, a year, they start in May. Well, they don't feel like they can get it before May, because it isn't a year, and someone just will not get it before the year is up.
And your
that's where
doctor
you-
doesn't want to do it until the
that's
year's
right,
up
and
either.
that's where you've had a lot of your trouble. Because they just feel like they have to pay so much, $25 to $30, and maybe just at that time they weren't ready for it, and that's where it has come up a lot of times.
Have there been some of the things that have come out of those physicals that have really helped the girls?
Well, to meet your minimum requirements, they'd have to furnish proof. That would be, of course, when they first join, or interpreted any way that you'd like to do it.
I think that's is a good point.
And that is in your state minimum, to meet your minimum requirements, that they furnish proof. The annual, of course, is the decision.
Well, I think in most any place where you apply for a position, you have to have a physical. Now, I think that's fine, but I think to make a person have a physical,
Or a progressive disease, it might be good to say, well, follow it up with a physical every year.
That's right.
Wouldn't that person show evidence of not being physically fit if she repeatedly refused calls, or had
Your
to be
business
replaced,
people
or show?
require physicals in business. In big business, they require their top men and all the men to have physical examinations. As a matter of fact, most of your business companies pay for those physicals.
if you don't have to have it a certain date. If you had a
Yearly,
annually,
annually.
Maybe
Maybe
it's
we could
right.
get a doctor to donate his time every
Annually.
January.
Well, that's where the girls that objected to many of them, because they've had to pay for their x-rays, they've had to pay for this, and it's been so expensive. And, they just did, and it was too soon before, now some of them have the physical in December of 1962. Well, then she, well, I have to get one in 1963. Well, by right, she should, if she was going like the rest of it, every year, because she had it in 62, but you really should count, you'd have to count it in 1963. So that's been really a problem. But you can't make anybody, do it, and they know they're supposed to, but you just can't take them.
Well, you can, when they are applying
That's right.
first,
That's
to
right.
come on the register, to have that physical and proof that it is
That's right. That is a
valued,
requirement.
see. Have that as a requirement for going on, as well as being in good standing.
That's right.
But that is about, I'm afraid, the only time that you, you know,
I think it is.
could.
It
Well,
would be compulsory, in
that,
other words.
It's
It-
hard conscientiously to let a critically ill patient do without a nurse just because the nurse hadn't sent in her physical.
By the same token, you wouldn't want to send one over there who had active tuberculosis to nurse that patient either.
Well,
Well, you could contract that within 30 days and it wouldn't show up. It might not be active when you did the physical, and then later in the year they might show the signs that would have showed up on x-ray.
I was just giving tuberculosis as an example. As we all know, we have alcoholics and we also have narcotic addicts. You see what I mean?
But they can get their friends to fill out the physical, and it defeats the purpose. You don't find it out till you get the reports from them from institutions where they acted funny or they walked down the hall.
Of course, we didn't make the
Well-
rules, as Miss Mays well knows. We didn't make them.
No, I realize
I just
that.
had a strong feeling
Uh,
about this, though, and I just wanted to speak
Well,
to it.
that's all right. What we want is for you to say what and how you feel, and be honest about it.
And I think, Miss Mace, we should cooperate one with the other.
That's right.
If they can't talk it out, and
Well, I agree with you with that, because you
Miss
cannot
White said
run
she
any
hadn't had
organization
any.
without turning over. And as I always remember and I was on the register committee for 11 years as a hospital person, by request, reappointed each year, as Miss Kellum knows. The work is just like it is in a hospital. What isn't finished with this register is given over, and everybody's supposed to leave on time and not have any extra expense to things. That I don't know what we're going to do other than go begging that to get a little money. And I do not feel it's fair to raise the dues to where nurses cannot afford to pay. And Miss Atkins turned off just a second, and let me say this.
Information that we couldn't get from our procedures, that we were to ask for that information from the chairman of the registry committee, that we were directly responsible to her, so to speak.
Yes, but if it's of anything of any importance, then she is to bring it to the executive board before it can be acted upon. There is to be no changes or not anything done, because the president and the executive board, if something one of you people did at that registrar, the registrar, one of you registrars did something there that was wrong, and you were sued, or the registrar was sued on account of it, and though your chairman told you to do it, she's not responsible, and she wouldn't take the responsibility of it. It would be put right back to the president and the board. That's what I have been trying to bring out.
Well, that's what I wanted made clear.
Well, I hope I've made that clear, because that is legal.
But it
That
hasn't
is
been
legal.
done that way.
I think
Well-
where some of that confusion came about was the fact that previously some of them were in the minutes of the board meeting and they were not authorized to have it when I first went into the office. And in order that they get the information there, and that one person be responsible to them, they had a meeting with Ms. Garland and the chairman, And, after the board meeting, we made up these special forms. Now, as far as that, I think that's what's been misleading to them, has made them feel that they have more authority. That didn't vest any more authority to that person. They only, it's just the fact that she would channel the information to the registry as it was enacted either by the board or by the registry committee. Of course, the committee making the recommendation to the board. I believe that has led to that confusion there to some extent, don't you, Ms. Garland? Because we did make up a special form so they would have it in writing, and all registrars are supposed to see that when it's carried back from a meeting, so there'd be no misunderstanding about carrying out orders. That it was down there who made the motion approved, and it had to be signed by Ms. Dixon and Ms. Garland, making it legal. And I think that's the thing that's given them a bit of trouble in that respect. Because the
It
rest of it,
shouldn't.
your bylaws and your rules are your,
That's right, that's right.
your law, so to speak.
Is there any other question, Ms. White? Is that clear to you?
Yes, it is, it is.
That,
Thank you, Ms. Green.
that. Well, if there's
And
no,
another question I wanted to ask, if we had,
well, just direct it to
is it more,
sister for once.
sister, is it more desirable to, have somebody that, knows the office to relieve, or just take, someone that's inexperienced?
I think in any type of work, we certainly would desire the more experience that they are available. No matter what type of work it is, we might be if they're available.
That is one question I was
Keep
going to
the
ask.
regular beat.
That's right. I was going to ask Miss Landford, even after you resign and retire, the two of you, if we need some extra help, it would be so much nicer to call you if you could come down to give the service instead of reaching out just for anyone to help. And to have that assurance from you people at this time, it would mean lots in the governing of the movements in the future. Because I feel with your years of experience, it'd be a whole lot better, even if you are senile, is that what you told me?
Well, I know, she's there and I'm on my way.
When they approved the manual there, they brought out the point, which I think is going to be something that needs to be clarified a little bit more, giving the director of the registries the authority for emergency relief only. Well,
To hire a private duty nurse.
private duty nurse. But you can't do that until it goes to the board, even, I mean, in other words, if it's an emergency relief just for 24 hours, that would be different, but if it's interpreted for days or more days, then it isn't an emergency.
Well, see, if I slip and break a leg, well.
Well, it
All
would
right.
seem to me, if I may offer this suggestion, and I'm gathering mine by all the information that's given to me. I get it from all sides, from every division. The fact that of your retired list, that you just have a relief of more than one or two or three, that may be called upon.
That's right. That's
And
just
it
what I'm
isn't
asking, that's just
And
what
I-
I'm
necessary that
asking,
members
for
of the Register
emergency.
Committee be familiar with the activities that are going on down there, and
I don't think it should go through the register committee. I think it should
That
go
you
through
have
the
more than
executive,
one, just like
the
the call
executives
list.
come from the board, that the executive secretary, or the person below the executive secretary, if the executive secretary is off, would be empowered with that privilege to call, we'll just give these two names, because we would have them standing by.
You'd have Ms. Bone and Ms. Wren and several
Well,
others.
that's
If
what
you
I-
had 6 people who are well-trained,
That's right.
that would be called to relieve those emergencies, you wouldn't have new people who knew nothing about it.
That's right. And if one couldn't come, the other one, they could. And as I say, it should not, I don't think it should go back to the register committee. It should, the executive registrar should be empowered to that. And then she would bring that immediately in writing to the president, what she has done, so that the president could clarify it at the next meeting.
Well, that was brought to my attention afterwards from members of the board, that would give us many headaches on that.
That's right.
That, by getting completely new people there, inexperienced, which takes time from regular people to train them, or at least to show them how it's done, that they felt we ought to eliminate that from the manual in making up the new copy and make some change there.
However, in case of a real emergency, you can't wait 24 hours for a board meeting to decide on whether they should call somebody or not.
Yes, but you have 6 people that you can call, and it wouldn't be an outside nurse, why?
May I ask you, aren't these 6 people supposed to be members of the 5th District and members of the GSCNA and in good standing to work at the registry?
You're talking about today, that was called to my attention that Ms. Wren.
I didn't say today.
You know,
I asked a question.
You are actually, to go according to the bylaws, every member, every registrar should be a member of the 5th District.
That's what I thought.
And those people can still qualify on that by being associate members, because associate membership would give you everything except the chair, committee, or the vote.
That's
And
right.
they would still
And
be in good
I
standing.
feel that the people that would give their names would be willing to pay what is required, or I think after so many years' service and when they retire, I think they should be made honorary members.
Well, they called it to my attention today that Ms. Wren had not been a member, and I thought that's what you were
No,
referring
I didn't
to.
call it to your attention.
Well, and you didn't. Mrs. Hensley called it to my
I
attention.
didn't know that.
Well, she did, I get it, I tell you, from all sides.
I'd be
And,
glad to,
She, was an associate member last year, she is not a member, she did this as a courtesy when we were directed to ask if she would fill in.
Now, when I sent my resignation in, I told them that I would be glad to help out until they could find a suitable person for my place. And I would be glad to help in emergency.
That's right.
That way.
And I'll do the same
Thank you.
when I.
You want to turn it off, and we'll adjourn.
Just say, if Mrs. Jones had registered with us 3 or 4 years ago, and she sent in her resignation that she was leaving town, but she was in good standing. Well, then if she came back this year, but she came back in July, then she would have to pay the full amount of dues because she'd already been on our board. All right, if we had a new nurse that came in and registered in July or June, and had not been on the board, then she would not have to pay the full amount of $35. Now, that has always been the way that we have taken care of it.
That is
I can't
not the
find
rule.
anything in your
It
minutes for
says
that.
But
only
it
the
has
new
gone down
graduate.
From time to time, Ms. Joyner taught us that, and that's the way we have been doing. So if that's been wrong, that we've been doing that way, that's the way we were told to do.
It
Nothing in the
states
file.
only
I've
the
been through
new
it.
graduate is allowed to pay half-year dues previous to her standing the state boards.
Now, you mentioned there that I'd spent a whole day. I went back to 1943 to try to find that, to clear it. At one time, they were given, the new graduates were given courtesy. At another time, they were given 1 month.
And then
Then they
paid
got to
so
$1
much a month.
$1 per
month.
call. But, I questioned Ms. Dixon about it, and I believe it's in 1954, as I wrote in my letter, there is a point on there where it said new member. But that was supposed to, the minutes were not correct. They should have said a new graduate be allowed the half-year membership. And there's nothing there. I've been through the file completely and back to 1943. So I feel very definitely that somewhere along your channels have been lost, or either it's in the material that has been taken out of the files. You know, a good bit of it had to be. We only had 1 file, and I still have 3 stacks of it to go through. I'm going to.
Well, we haven't been doing anything wrong then by doing that, because that's the way we have been doing it.
So I think what we ought to do is just to have that brought back before the committee and clarified, and either have it, excuse me, either have it yes or no, and have something on the record about it.
Well, here's
Because
another.
we could not find it except for the new graduate, except that one expression where it said new member, be given the 1/2 year. I know when I was president, they said, well, if they gave it to them half year, many would wait until after July.
Well, now, these girls that come in and have just 4 or 5 weeks to work, they say, well, it doesn't pay me, I'll just go in the doctor's office. And there we're losing private duty nurses. And I don't blame them when the others that they've known over the years has just paid half. For them to pay the full amount when they're just gonna nurse a few weeks. It doesn't seem fair.
May I ask you, how are we going to meet the bills up there if the girls don't pay their dues? What do you propose?
We'll have to have them as
A
members.
federal
That
grant?
we know because of the taxation and so forth. I think we're gonna have, and we do grant a half year to the new graduate joining for the first time after July. Even those that are standing state board now are supposed to pay the half year dues. Same
Well,
way as half
that's
year
new,
membership.
that's something new.
Half year and membership. Well, I clarified that with Ms. Dixon on there, and I got the minutes and read them to her, and, they say, well, here, we've never had the courtesy before, we've been missing out on all these new graduates, and what happened last year was, one of your St. Joseph graduates, Ms. Bleakley, came up in April and said she didn't know anything at all about paying dues. I did not have the courtesy list at any time until this year. We had more than 500. And you see, out of that group, you have a number of them doing private duty. But they have to pay dues because we can't service them. We've been breaking the law in regards to taxation and the professional registry. So the 1625 there, they may have the privilege of using the registry, but they still have to be a member of the registry, and they're given courtesy membership in the district until they stand state board.
And there's no more part-time paying $1 a shift?
With the new manual, all of that was supposed to have gone in effect in January. We're trying to get it done before the old
It's
board
coming
changed.
this January
Yes.
1963.
That's right, and
Well,
the auditors told us, you see, the whole thing was brought in September the 14th was your annual meeting at the time that we would make it official. The board took it on the 12th. And naturally, you would not start in November or December. Breaking up something like that would be impractical. You couldn't. But beginning January, then anybody doing part-time duty would pay half, and then in June, if they want to continue more, just pay another half. That would give you the $25. The auditors said that $1 was absolutely a waste of time, a waste of bookkeeping, and certainly an inaccurate way because many of them were not reporting. And when Ms. Honeycutt, now I did not take the responsibility for the registry. I did not even get a registry manual until the day it was compiled, although I had written in April, and gone to the secretary conference in July. I had 4 states, Louisiana, Texas, and all, and I had tried to get a manual from all of them, even a while to A&E just before that. And the very day it was put together, I was given a manual. I did not know that one existed. So we had to make it out of thin air on what we had for the district, and going through the files and all your bylaws and everything, and your rules, as nearly as possible, particularly not working in the registry. And to keep out of it, I asked Ms. Honeycutt to go and to interview all of you, and she brought her notes down and stayed about 3 hours. So the rest of it was put there. We know it isn't finished, and you may find many things that need to be added and to be taken off of the manual. But that was as nearly accurate as we could get it with nothing else to go on.
Well, I can't see how, when you make an agreement with a nurse that she can be on part-time and pay $1 a shift, then in midstream, all of a sudden write to her and send her a bill for the balance of $35.
No, that was
Now, that
supposed
isn't
to,
good business,
the
I don't think.
understanding was by all of us who worked on it, that anything would start at the beginning of the year, to start off. But
Yeah,
this
see,
was
this is
something
the right
that
in midstream, all this is.
This was in the planning stage, you see. Now, I don't even have the manuals out. I'm working on them right now. As of yesterday at 11 o'clock, I called answering service to please take over. I'm making up 120 manuals. I tried for 3 weeks to do it. I couldn't even get the corrections done from the telephone call. So, actually, the manual will be distributed to all the hospitals, nursing service. Each registrar will have one, so she can refer to it constantly. And we try to put everything we could possibly put in there for information. In fact, so much so there's repetition. But rather than delete it and lose your trend and your continuity, you will find that there is some repetition.
Well, now, there's one other thing I want to say, if I may. We are not allowed now to give out a registry card to a member. And Ms. White said she was told not to, isn't that right, Ms. White, not to leave any signed cards?
Well, they print
There.
those up in the state. They print
Well,
all those
they
with the
printed,
names on
but
it.
see, she's supposed, all of the registrars heretofore have signed those cards, and if a member comes in and they are clear, it makes us look funny to, not to be able to give her a card. It just doesn't seem right.
It's my understanding that 2 years ago there were 75 nurses. Will this pick up my voice? There were 75 nurses who were on that register who had those cards, who were on there illegally.
I never gave anybody a
And
card
I
that didn't
never
have a
have
Fifth
either.
District
I
dues.
don't know who gave them to them, but someone left the office immediately after that meeting. And that's what I was told. And I wanted to be sure that everyone was registered with the GSNA.
Well, why don't you say
Well,
Fifth
we-
District?
Well,
Fifth
Fifth
District.
District.
Certainly could,
Because
Fifth District.
Fifth District is responsible
Left
for
out.
all the registry, and so much of it has
Alright.
been going to the GSNA, but actually this is Fifth District.
Well, since so many people had been sent out who were not with the 5th District and who had not been cleared by the 5th District, was trying to head off trouble. In other words, it would not go out over my signature.
Well, why can't each registrar go ahead and sign?
Let
one?
her
Wouldn't
go
that be a
ahead and
solution?
sign them
Well,
then.
listen, we have been signing them when we always they always show us their Fifth District cards.
Had you been signing your name or the registrar's, chief registrar's name?
Miss Vaughn, the chief registrar
would
always
leave them
signed cards, and then we had cards there.
And we put the number
And
on.
we put the number and typed the nurse's name on, but the cards
Well,
have been
Now,
signed.
we did sign
So
cards
did
when
Mrs.
we
White
was
sign
right up.
cards and let them go out
Well,
also.
Mrs. White was
They're
chief
just vice
registrar.
chairman when Ms. White isn't there.
But now,
And-
this 225 cards that was given out, do you have any of that in writing, or is it just gossip?
What do you mean 225
Well,
cards?
didn't
I've
you
never
say-
heard of it.
Well, I thought you just said
75.
75 cards.
I
Do
was
you
to-
have any of that in writing?
No, I don't, but
well,
I
see,
was
it's just
told
gossip.
that 75 people were on there illegally.
Yes, I know, but how do you know that?
I
Unless
don't.
well, that's what I say. So I
don't.
don't think that should be given out. I don't think anything should be given out unless you have it in writing.
Well, Mrs. Mays, do I have your permission to sign my name to all these cards? Because if I do, I can sign them immediately and take them back by the office.
Well, what they're saying, if, you know, the chief registrar is supposed to sign them, if somebody comes in and,
Just to leave a few at a time.
That's right.
In there, so if they come
I
in to
think,
pay their dues.
I
You
don't
wanna
see
save
what would
money,
be
you've got
hurtful.
to send out stamps again.
If
You
you need
have-
them numbered, if you want to keep
you-
them in sequence, we've got a little numbering machine.
Well, ours are all numbered,
They're
and
all
as your
numbered.
the receipt number we put up in the top, like if it's 719, and we type her name, and then down here is this, the chief registrar's name that's been signed on that, that's printed out. But that number up in the corner is the receipt number that we have taken her $35 dues.
But you can hear anything. I've heard lots of things, and I know a lot of them are not true. But there was one thing I do want to clear up. I understand that my name was given as having accepted bribes, that I had been bribed.
Did you have that in writing?
No, I didn't have it in
All right,
writing.
let's have it in writing.
Well, that's,
As Miss Mays
But-
says.
well,
But
that's,
I
that's right. I don't
understood
think anything
someone
like
said
that,
it was reported to
is
you, Miss
official
Vaughn.
unless it's in writing.
Let's have, I think Miss Mays is right. Let's have it in writing.
All right.
Well, I wondered though why you didn't say anything to me about it.
Because I don't know what you're talking about.
It wasn't reported to you.
No.
Well, and I said, well, I hadn't taken any bribes. Now, I've had families call and they'll say, oh, if you can get a nurse, I'll be glad to pay her extra. And I'll say, well, she doesn't charge anything extra. If I can get one, she'll come. But that's not bribing me. Now, the girls have brought us little gifts up there, but I think it's just to show their love and appreciation sometimes. But I have never taken a bribe.
Well, I haven't either, I know that.
Well, when those people accuse you of taking bribes, why don't you ask them to put it in writing,
Well,
sign their
they-
name to it?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I should have, because they said that you had a
Maybe
list.
you'd like to tell the names now.
No, I
No?
don't know who all was in. They said that you had the list, Miss White.
Who's they?
Well,
Let's call names. Call a spade, Mrs. Keller. It's being
Well,
All right,
recorded.
I think
It's
it's
just
time that
gossip.
we go, because I have got to go. And